Good morning. We are getting started because it's a couple minutes after the hour. And hello and welcome to the Immune Deficiency Foundation's 18th Forum, Understanding Your Child's Educational Rights. My name is Kathy Antela, and I will be your host today. Now, here we go to welcome back our return attendees. It is so great to see you again. And for those new participants, welcome. It is my sincere hope that you enjoy today's program and will join us again as we continue to develop new programming. Our forums are created to serve you. And as you can see from our mission statement, IDF is dedicated to serving our community and providing you with timely information and resources that will help you every step of the way in your journey with PI. You'll notice under our mission statement that we do have some multiple words listed there. These words are our values, guiding principles, and constituent promise. And these drive our work at IDF and help us to fulfill our mission of fostering a community empowered by education. We want you to always remember that IDF is committed to our community, serving you as a trusted source, though through the use of technology and innovation, as you can see today. We are here to give you the tools and information to become empowered, and specifically through our forums, we offer you our compassion, understanding, and support to emphasize that, again, you are not alone on your journey. We're all in this together, every single step of the way. Welcome. At this time, I would like to thank our sponsors of this event. It is because of their partnerships and contributions that IDF is able to bring you programs and services so that you can be better informed. And this includes core service sponsors, CSL Behring, Grifols, Takeda, core services supporters, Octapharma, core service sustainer, Horizon Therapeutics, core service contributor, Leadient Biosciences and ADMA Biologics, national sustainer, Accredo, national patrons, Diplomat Specialty Infusion, Kedrion Biopharma, CVS Specialty, Quorum CVS Specialty Infusion Services, Koru Medical Systems, and Kava Fusion. Now, at this time, I would like to invite Mark Faulkner from Accredo for a quick word from our sponsor.
I think I'm trying. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for having me this morning. I appreciate it. I'm with Accredo Specialty Pharmacy. My name is Mark Faulkner, and I am one of the account executives. Accredo is a full-service specialty pharmacy that specializes in multiple medications, oncology, but on this call, obviously primary immune deficiency, that is one of our specialization areas. And I look forward to talking to everybody in the breakout. We have more information to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Next, I would like to invite Ron Johnson from CSL Behring for a quick word from our sponsor.
There we go. Hey, how you doing, guys? I'm Ron Johnson. I'm with CSL Behring. Lucky enough to come again. This is my third go around, so I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Hector, as well, and thank you, IDF Foundation. I am the area manager for the Los Angeles area. I live in Granada Hills, so I heard someone say that they used to live in Santa Clarita. That's where my mother-in-law lives. But I do cover Hizentra, and Hizentra is the proven personalized leader for primary immune deficiency. So I'm glad to be here, and I'll answer more questions in the breakout. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Okay, now the moment you've all been waiting for, I would like to introduce our presenters, Chris Riley and Valerie Riley. Chris is a vice president in a middle school located within the Palmdale School District in California. Valerie is a teacher within the Lancaster School District in California, where she provides instruction to students with medical needs. Both have been longtime members of our community And it is my great pleasure to welcome them back today. Welcome, Chris and Valerie.
Good morning. Appreciate the promotion, Kathy, but I'm still only an assistant principal, vice principal, not the vice president yet.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to be Biden's pick.
Probably not.
Okay.
One of the biggest things when you have to determine is, the big question comes in, where do I start? How do I do this? And so education is huge, because when you go into a school to communicate with them and that, the more information you know, then you can go in to really be your child's advocate. You're able to go in, you're able to go, okay, and know your rights. That's huge, because sometimes you'll go into a school and they might tell you, oh, well, we just can't do that. And it's like, oh, no, you can, but a lot of parents will take that, and because they don't feel confident. Well, they're the specialist. They're telling me it can't be done, but, it can be done. Know your diagnosis of your child. That's huge. You don't have to know all the specific, all these like medical field things, but the basic stuff, what it is, what did your child receive, what kind of medication are they on, what is their diagnosis, because you'll be amazed that a lot of people, they don't know. They know they have PI, that's it. So it's okay. It's okay to ask those questions of the doctor, and the doctor will give you those questions. You tell the doctor, I'm going to be going in. So one of the things is just to, when you first start, go in and ask the doctor, I need to, we need some accommodations. It's not going well for my child. Can you help me? What do you suggest? What do you feel their needs are? Because when you do a 504 plan, that is required, is that you bring in what the recommendations are also from the doctor, that you have a medical diagnosis. They won't then argue with you as much, I guess. Hopefully you would have a great team and that wouldn't be an issue, but there are some places where it may not be, and you may have to fight and advocate for your child. And then you're going, okay, well, how do I know? What do I know what to say? The IDF Publications, they are very, very helpful. I actually, when my son was still in school, and we would obtain especially the school guide for each of his teachers. Even in high school, when he would go to new teachers, we use these resources because they are amazing. And so I highly suggest that if you haven't received copies of these, that you contact the Immune Deficiency Foundation, the address up there, call, go to the site, the website, because these are going to be very huge resources when you do actually go into the school. If you go in and you're going, here we go, I've got the information for you, and then they can't say, well, I need to look into that more. It's like, I have it for you. Here you go. Communication. A lot of times, you may think, oh, but I'm being a broken record. I just keep calling. You need to keep calling. You need to keep, those communication lines open. Actually, they really do appreciate it in the end if you have those communications. There are a lot of different ways to do it. In person, that's, then they put that face to you. But when you do go in person, also, one of the big things you have to remember is that you need to actually document all your contacts. So then if someone else comes back, you're like, well, on July 12th, at this time, I spoke with so-and-so and they gave me that. Phone, the same thing. Phone communications, you'll want to make sure that you record it and write it all down. You can write a letter and then just keep a copy of it. But if you write a letter, you just got to make sure it gets to that person, because it may or may not. Email is a huge one. If you email, you already have the documentation. You could print those emails. In today's thing, with a lot of distance learning, classroom teachers, principals are setting up class dojo or a system like that. And if you do the dojo with your teacher, know that you can also print out that communication to have for future reference.
And yeah, I'm gonna encourage you, like Valerie said, you have to be persistent. So in the case of the school where I'm an assistant principal, there's 1,000 students, there's 3 administrators. We oversee the 1,000 students, 50 teachers, another 25 or 30 classified staff members. So if you're not persistent, it's really something that's easy for me to like forget. And I feel bad about that because I mean, I know what you're going through, and yet the drama and the busyness of my day, it's really easy to sit there and go, oh, I saw your email, but this one's more important in the grand scheme of things because it affects more people. So you just have to keep at it, keep at it, keep at it. There are times where I get an email from a parent 3 times, and I'm like, oh wow, I can't believe I missed it. I have to respond. So don't think you're being a bug. What you should think is, I need to be the advocate for my child. We want to answer your concerns. We want to have those conversations. Sometimes we just get busy with what happens in the course of running a school.
And with your email, if your child has more than one teacher, one thing we did is we looped all the teachers in, as well as the principal that was in charge of Ian's 504 plan, because then it's like, because they'll say, oh, well, okay, I'll let the team know, but something may happen, a communication snafu, a teacher's absent a couple of days and comes back and misses it because they have 150 emails. So document everything and don't be afraid to do that communication. And just be prepared. Before you go in, have that doctor's note. Because a lot of times you'll get in there and they'll say, okay, well, we need you to do this before we can proceed. So if you go in with those things up front, go in with those, the handbooks, the school handbook from the IDF. Go in with the doctor's note so that they don't say, oh, well, we have to wait for this. Because if you go in with those things, go in with ideas of modifications that you feel are needed for your child. Because you're going to know, do they need extra time on assignments? Are they hospitalized a lot? And you're going to have that information. So if you go in and you're prepared up front, then it'll really help make things go faster for one thing, because you don't want to have 10 meetings to do something. You still may have to have a second meeting, but if you go in with those basic things, they should at least, be able to get the ball rolling right then. And it may be you're going from preschool into school. You're going from even just teacher to teacher, from one year to the next. You want to make sure that teacher isn't necessarily going to get all that information that you gave that first teacher. So you need to, have that information and just give it to them up front. Believe me, as a teacher, I know that was something that I value, is when parents do contact me and say, hey, my child needs, so and this or this in order for their education to be able to be full, because if we're worried, we find out 3 weeks later that, wow, they needed to be able to wash their seat, the seat area down every 20 minutes or whatever, then they'll be ready.
Education law, when it comes to 504s and IEPs, education law drives all of this. So, and there's a lot of black and white when it comes to 504s and it comes to IEPs. Now, there's a whole lot of legal jargon. There's a whole lot of what I call educationese, where we speak in a language that's completely foreign to people. And I think that's really, really tough. Because when I'm talking to you, and we use acronyms like crazy. For the course of this thing, we won't say many of them, but it's the IEP based on IDA, and we got to worry about the ADA, and people come into meetings and it's intimidating. I'm not going to tell you otherwise. You're going to sit in a room with 5 or 6 different people, and all of them have advanced degrees, and they're talking to you about what the law says this and what the law says that, and they start speaking a foreign language. It's really great for you to go, stop, time out. I have no idea what you guys are saying. Please slow down. Please explain to me what you're saying. I can't stress enough that in those meetings, you are the person that's most important when it comes to what's happening. You are the advocate for your child. That meeting was held for one reason and one reason only, for your child. So everyone there is really there for you. And don't let them get it confused that this is just a process that we have to do. We need to rubber stamp it and we need to keep rolling because we have timelines and all these other things that have to take place.
And also, we actually had someone we have worked with, and they actually were told in an IEP meeting for their new child that had just got put in to special ed, oh, well, we'll fix that next year. And I'm like, no, we're not. You're going to contact them and say, no, we're going to fix it now. Because, I mean, it was really, this child, they wanted to, who is blind, they wanted to sort by color. And what they had done is just gone through the daily schedule and written a goal for all of them. So it's okay to say, whoa, stop. You know, we need to really look at this. And if you need to, you can contact the IDF and they can help provide support and answer questions for you.
And I would never tell my school district this, but when it comes to an IEP, I would never sign it on the spot. I would take it home. I would read it. I would talk to people who know what they're talking about when it comes to education. Make sure that what's in that IEP is what's best for your child. And you can only do that. I mean, we're trying to shotgun down a meeting in my building. We want them done in 50 minutes. It's the teacher's prep. So, and for a lot of these, if we're doing one where there's assessment, 50 minutes is not long enough. It's not long enough for us to have a discussion about what your student knows, what academic performance that they're having. We just don't have time to tell you all those things. So it's a rushed meeting. Don't let it be rushed. If it gets to a spot where we have to end it, you go, well, I think we need to table and we need to move to another date and have a second meeting. Never feel like you have to sign something. Never feel like you have to rush through something.
And to avoid the adversarial part, because sometimes then people will get nervous, the school personnel, tell them up front, you know, I just want you to know up front that I want to take a copy home so that I can review it. They will have you sign on one of the lines, and that one just states that you are in attendance at that actual meeting. But it is not saying you agree with the IEP. So they'll send you home with a cover sheet.
And so the education laws, if you're ever in doubt of whether your child's school service is being appropriate, whether the school's doing everything they're supposed to do, the following laws really kind of give you an idea. You have your Section 504. You have Free Appropriate Public Education, FAPE. You have your Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, and then, of course, Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. So there are a lot of things and a lot of laws that really map out what we're supposed to do as a school district when it comes to the education of children with disabilities. And if you have a child who has a PI, you have a student going to school that qualifies as a student with having disabilities. Either they fall under Section 504 or they fall under IDEA, which ultimately results in an IEP. When it comes to the Section 504, it's a civil rights law. So it protects the rights of individuals and programs that receive federal assistance. That would be school districts. Every 10 cents of every dollar inside of a school district comes from federal funding. So students that are in special education, they receive federal funding. Students that have a 504, they receive not specific federal funding, but it can be taken away if those rights are violated. The one thing that you should know, and this is usually if you have to be adversarial with a district, is that students with disabilities are one of the only students in schools that have civil rights. You can file a civil rights complaint. When it comes to a 504, we have to make sure that we're providing a free public education, that we are doing what we're supposed to do for a student that qualifies with a disability to actually level the playing field and make sure that they can have the same educational experience. it's important to remember that when we're talking about this, there's no guarantee of equal outcome, because even with kids without disabilities, we can't guarantee that. What we can guarantee, though, is that every student has a similar experience inside of a school building, regardless of any of the things that may prevent them physically, mentally, or otherwise. So when it comes to like a disability, it can be physical, it can be mental. There are 14 qualifying categories when it comes to a student with a disability. The one that fits most PI kids is that limitation of major life activity. As we all experiencing parents that have PI, there are days where my son could not walk. He had a really, really tough time just getting out of bed. He had a difficult time some days where he would sleep for days on end. And that was something that we just had to let him do. I mean, I think we're fortunate. We had my wife who also has a PI. So there were days where she would see through what's going on. She's like, yeah, no, you're going to get up and go to school because I don't feel good either, but we're not sick. We just don't feel good. It's on those days it was so important for our son to have a 504 because there were those accommodations put in place to the times where he just wasn't feeling great. Not sick, no fevers, none of those kinds of things, just didn't feel good.
Reasonable accommodations, because in a 504 plan and in the IEP both, you will have accommodation/modification section. The accommodations, like for a 504 plan, it's to level that playing field. It's not to mean that, oh, well, you know, I'm going to have this thing way up here and others are not. It just means that it's equal, whether that is in high school that they get to choose their classes first because they are able to concentrate in the morning, but by afternoon they're pretty wiped. So to take a less stressful class than in the afternoon. Requested accommodations that are reasonable in nature, they don't give them that advantage. It just, you know, to be over the kids, it gives them the same so that with their peers without medical issues, that they can still succeed. With the 504 plan, our son graduated valedictorian status. But not because they gave him his grades, but because accommodations were made. One of the big ones was, you know, he had so much time after a hospitalization or an illness to make up the work. That means that it's level, because he would have been at school and would have been doing the work had he been physically capable of doing it. We do not want to put undue financial or administrative on the institution, but we want what they deserve in order to be able to succeed.
No, I was just going to say, because there are times, and we've experienced this as a school, where the parent makes just something like and just to be completely, make this really hyperbolic, like, oh, down in this place, the student's receiving, you know, dolphin therapy. So dolphin therapy would be a great accommodation for my son because it'll help reduce stress and all those kinds of things. And you're like, no, we can't do that. We're not going to be able to provide that based on our school district. Or I saw one where a parent was like, well, my son has a 504 and so he plays sports, but he has to miss, like, you know, a day every month and the coach won't let him play the next game. Well, the coach makes accommodations to make sure the student can actually go play the sport, be healthy, have all those safety concerns taken care of, but they still have to follow the same rules. Even if you have to have a doctor's appointment, if the rule sets for anybody else, if you miss a practice because of whatever reason you're not going to play, the same rule applies, even with a 504 and all those other things. It really is just an opportunity that every student can participate at the same level as everyone else. And so that's the really big reason why we had to get a 504 for our son.
There are a lot of different accommodations. This is just a few of them actually listed out. During outbreaks of communicable diseases that they report to you that's in the school, it's in their class, but the school does not have to tell you who. We have a lot of parents that'll come and go, but which student has it? You're not going to be told that. It's just giving you that information so you can pass it on to your doctor and your medical team that, okay, Johnny was exposed to MRSA or Johnny was exposed to whatever, that you have that information. And that's a really important one that you want to have in there, because some schools, well, they just don't really want other people knowing because they don't want people to get all upset. But it's important that you have that given to you. One of Ian's teachers, when he was young, actually, she said, they said not to say anything, but you need to know that, you know, fist disease is going around in the classroom. Because Ian, if you say it, he got it. So, I mean, we needed to know because we knew he was going to get it. Providing 2 sets of textbooks. Again, especially if you have a child that misses a lot, that's important. In high school, it's important that they are able to have them in the classroom so that they don't have to necessarily carry them around with them. And so we had in Ian's that you would have a textbook there, and yet he would have a textbook at home so that if he had to miss, we weren't having to try to scramble to get to the school to get a book. They'll say, and you will have some schools will give it to you, no problem. Other ones will say, well, we can't do that. But they can, and they need to. Extend assignment deadlines or postpone a test date. You probably want that in too, because essentially what would happen if you didn't have it, we've had a lot of people that we've known that have had to deal with, they've been gone in the hospital for 3 weeks, and there's a test the day they go back to school, and they were expected to take the test. That doesn't make that playing field even. It doesn't make it level. Providing a copy of teachers or another student's note, and it's not that they shouldn't have to go and like seek that out. That should be just given to them, because when they go back, they're already stressed that they're going back, they've missed this. I have to try to go find someone that they can copy notes for. They need to get that copy of them. Procedure to obtain missed assignments. A lot of them nowadays, they go into and post assignments online. So that actually helps with that one. And access to distance learning technology. When we went to COVID last year, when we went to distance learning from it, we actually had where in our district, they didn't have enough technology at that time. So only students in grades 3 and above were going to be issued computers and laptops. And so I always put into my students' IEPs, just because I know how important it is that they will have access to the technology to reinforce their education. So my kindergarten and first graders actually received the laptops, iPads, whichever one they had available, to access their learning during that time. And my kids would have missed out totally if we had not been able to do it.
And those accommodations, they apply whether your student's going to be in hybrid, whether it's going to be distance learning, whether your district's servicing them in a completely different way. There are always accommodations that can be made that the school district is responsible for. And I think now, especially when we're talking about lots of distance learning, know those possible accommodations that you can use that are available to you, that the school district has to provide in order for your child to access their education at the highest level they can.
And hybrid, in case anyone doesn't know what that means, it's like a term we've pretty much come into education with COVID. It means that your district they've decided that you'll go 3 days or whatever, partial days in person and partial days on the computer with live instruction or asynchronous.
When it comes to the 504, we were talking about this prior to, and I've never done this in any of our things, but I think it's important to know from someone who's gone through it the reason why we got ours. So our son was always really, really good in school, but he typically missed 35-ish days per year, but he'd always get straight A's. As a third grader, he had gone to this awards ceremony and he was the student of the class, and he had all these different kinds of grades and all this other sort of stuff where he's doing fantastic in school. And he gets a letter from the principal, from the school district principal, addressed to him, not to his parents, but specifically to him. So he opens it up, and they're talking about how he's missed this many days of school, how it's going to harm his education if he continues to miss school. He's a third grader, so he's about 8 or 9 years old reading this. I mean, a PI kid who's an 8 or 9 year old, but one of those things where he was always 9 going on like 39. So it was that time where we said, we really have to get something that's in place to protect when it comes, especially like attendance issues. The superintendent of the school district knew, but the principal didn't. So when you think about 504 plan, it is not special education. It is a general education document. It provides those reasonable accommodations. It has procedural safeguards. So the Office of Civil Rights oversees this. And that's really important because there are times where there are teachers, well, the 504 is a suggestion. No, it's not a suggestion. It is a law. You have to follow it. It is enforceable. If you don't, you can get in a lot of trouble for it. We as a school can get in trouble, and individually as a teachers, they can get in trouble. So understand that piece of paper, it has a lot of the same weights as an IEP does. It's just not for students that qualify for special education. So IDEA, that's the part that maps out when we talk about special education. So the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, it is that part that adversely affects educational performance. We're talking about that a 504 is great for a student who's still doing well academically, but they need accommodations. When we start talking about IEPs, these are things where academics are being impacted because of a disability. And students with a PI typically qualify under the term OHI, which is another health impairment. And it's divided into 4 major sections. If you ever have questions specifically about IEPs, you look at Part B, because that's the education of children from 3 to 22. It's the part where you'll find the vast majority of the information that you're looking for. It also tells you what the guidelines are and the specifications to qualify under a certain disability. Be aware that while IDEA kind of covers everything, your state also probably has special education law written into their own Department of Ed and in their own education code. So some things are different from state to state, but by and large, this covers every student across the nation.
Okay. One thing to note, I know that some of you may be having kids that are in college. They do have a disability resource center, and that's what you would need to access at that point. And one of the big things to know is when you get there, they're not going to talk to you. They talk to the student, and literally we had to have Ian sign a special paper in order for us to be able to even speak on his behalf, even if he was in the room. So we had to do that. And so that's one of the biggest things to think of there. I'm sure that if you have any more questions, you can always ask those questions.
When it comes to the IEP itself, it is special education. It is federally funded. It provides that individual education benefit. The word you'll hear more often on it's ed benefit, it's ed benefit. And it's one of those, the meeting I talked about where there's a bunch of people in the room all having those conversations at the same time. It has measurable annual goals. Those goals are supposed to be specifically designed for your child to access the curriculum while giving them what we call scaffolds. Those things that make it so they can actually reach the education standards that we're expecting them to reach. Transition plans, we start them at 14 years old as we start looking at what their post-high school opportunities are going to look like. Every school district has procedural safeguards. They offer them to you every time. My suggestion is that if it's your first couple of rodeos, take them. Read them. They're going to offer to read them to you. Most people don't have 4 hours to sit through listening to me read them, the procedural safeguards. Take them home and read them though, because those are where all of your rights come from. If there's something that's wrong, it tells you, what do I need to do if I want to call another IEP meeting? What do I do if I think there's something wrong with this? What do I do if my school district doesn't respond in the way that they're supposed to respond? Everything is put in those procedural safeguards to help you find out what the next steps are, whether things are going great or whether you have some contention with your school district. And again, it is fully enforceable.
An important thing to remember is first communicate with the school. Don't go straight to, I'm going to go file a complaint, because most of the time the schools are going to work with you and they're going to be able to work it out without having to go that route. And it doesn't cause adversarial relationship then to say, you know, I'm concerned, you know, as a parent, I know that my child needs this, and can we please reconvene an IEP meeting so that we can discuss this?
Yeah, as a building site administrator, I can tell you what happens. So if you go to my special education department in my school district and you make a complaint, they're going to send an email to me and the other assistant principal and principal in my building, and then we're going to handle it at a site-based level. So if you go straight to the site, you cut out the middleman, because the time you go to special ed is when your site administrators decide that they're not going to be accommodating, they're not going to, and you know that legally there's something they should be doing. Like, oh, we're not gonna, your kid is a PI, but they're okay, so we're not gonna do a 504 or an IEP. What we're gonna do is we're just gonna watch and monitor. And no, that's not what I asked for. I asked for one of these things to take place. We at least have to have a meeting. We have to have a discussion. We have to have data and all these other things take place. We have to assess. So don't take that as, don't skip spots, because more often than not, I catch it later. I'm like going, we could have handled this so easy. It's a 2-minute conversation with the teacher going, hey, we gotta get this taken care of. And they're like, oh, I completely forgot. I can't believe that I let that slip. That's usually what we end up dealing with more often than not, as opposed to a couple of different emails back and forth between people that have no idea what's happening with your child.
Changes. Okay, I know that a lot of people, this is like a huge thing, because we are in unprecedented times, like everyone keeps saying, especially here in California. Every time the governor speaks, you know, we hear that. We now have, for our special ed students, distance learning plans. These are plans that are in addition to that IEP. So you're going to be contacted by your child's teacher, and they're going to have to come up with it. How are we going to meet your students' needs during that time? Whether they have an IEP, you know, or 504, they still have to know what is our plan going to be. And in California, we have to review those every 2 weeks, because parents may have changed their minds. So that's one of the big things. So you may hear the DLP. That's just distance learning plan, just one of those acronyms they just keep throwing at us. Some of our face-to-face services have moved to digital or are not able to be provided in the same manner. A lot of times, like physical therapy, if your child would need physical therapy as part of their disability, you're going to possibly be getting live services. So like through Zoom or WebEx or one of the formats. You may also have that hybrid that we talked about, which is part in-class, part distance learning. Assessments have moved to digital formats in some, based on curriculum-based measurements. File reviews are another thing that they're using, because they do not want to have that contact to expose those children if they don't have to be exposed. Our district, for students that are just being referred, they will have what they're calling their testing centers, which will have the face shields and all this stuff provided to be able to have those, because when we were in an emergency situation last spring, we are now having to follow IDAA 100%. So our timelines are now back on. Because before we allowed the parents, if they didn't feel comfortable doing the meetings virtually, we allowed them, that we pushed it back, and there was a code that we were able to put in. Now the government and they're saying nope, not anymore. We're back to 100%. So that's why the testing centers have come into play. IEP consent is still required, and the timelines have to be met. If not, if there is something going on, then they can put for an extension, but that is more rare than not. If a child's in a hospital, and they're unable to do it. It's not something that the school can just say, oh, well, because of COVID, we're not going to hold your kid's IEP. They can't do that. It's just a big thing. There should be a lot more contact between the school and parents. And that's not you having to initiate it. Those teachers should be calling you. You should be doing live chats, one-on-one sessions. So, you know, you should have it. If you're not getting that communication, then yeah, definitely initiate it yourself. But we don't have that option to say, oh, well, I'm going to call you once a week, or, oh, I'll call you every 3 weeks. You know, unless that's your preference and you're attending and your child's attending and actually doing the work, then that would go in that distance learning plan. But it's not the school's decision that they aren't going to contact you, but every 3 weeks. And everything now is back to being fully enforceable. We have to write our goals. When you go in, some of your goals will be written as though the times in that are going to be written as though your child is actually in school. And so, but the modifications will be done, and they will be, you have the right, if your child has a goal to do X, Y, and Z, and you don't have the materials to do that, they do need to provide you with those. We have actually put together bins for our students that have every goal that they have what they need. If they need a ball for APE, they've got a ball in there. We're sending home all the adaptive equipment too. So just know that it is fully enforceable. Even though it's unprecedented times, they still have to give our kids those legal rights of a level playing field. And I think we're on to Kathy. That's it.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Chris and Valerie. That was amazing information. And all of us parents are always needing the experts like you to help us with the next steps at school. As a reminder to participants, you can continue to submit your questions via chat. And during the Q&A, Chris and Valerie will answer as many of them as possible. Now, before we continue, I would like to invite Kurt Himes from Grifols for a quick word from our sponsor.
All right. See you. You guys there?
Yes, we're good.
All right. Well, hey, thanks. I want to thank the IDF for having us today, and I want to thank our speakers. You know, I've been with specialty pharmacy and now manufacturing, so I've been to different IDF meetings all around the western half of the United States for the past 10 years, and I really appreciate the IDF, and I appreciate our speakers like today that share their personal lives with everybody to try to help them. So they did a great and wonderful job today, so thanks for that. So a little bit about Grifols. You know, we are a manufacturer of immune globulins, so IVIG or subcutaneous products. We're a global company. We've been around since 1909 and helping patients all around the world. Our products are Gamunex C and Zembify. Excuse me. And, you know, integrity is wrapped into everything that we do. And that's the reason why we've actually improved and really increased our blood and plasma draw sites all around the country, because we only make our plasma or our product of immune globulin from plasma that we have sourced. So it comes from our facilities. It stays under our rules and guidelines for safety from the point that a patient gives it. We test it and make a drug. So basically, we have four main pillars. And for our company, for patient focus. And those four are education, advocacy, engagement, and support. And that's why we're here today as a proud sponsor of the IDF. And we look forward to the open forums coming up here soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Next, I would like to invite Carl Trenz from Octapharma.
Well, happy Saturday to everyone. Can you hear me, Kathy?
Yes, perfect.
All right, well, first I'd like to thank the IDF as well as Valerie and Chris. You know, if we think about their presentation, they talked about how important transparency is for you as a parent, as well as when you work with your school system. And there's no doubt, Valerie and Chris, that not only you're great parents, but you're awesome educators. So thanks again. Octapharma is a global manufacturer of both IVIG and subcutaneous IG holds one important pillar that we wanted to share with you today, and that is transparency as well. Here's what I mean by that. As of this morning, Octa Pharma had greater than a 6-month product supply in the US of our IVIG Octagan. And for those on subcutaneous therapy, greater than a 22-month supply. We know that you're concerned about supply of the therapy that keeps you well. Our mission every day is to be transparent, and hopefully this information was helpful for you. Moving forward in the forums, I'd ask you to join us. Our tremendous clinical nurse educator, Joanna Maltese, is going to share more clinical information as well as what you can do that you could directly benefit the IDF Foundation. Kathy, thanks again, and everybody have a great Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Now, at this time, Chris and Valerie are going to begin answering your questions. Thank you for sending them in. Keep sending them via the chat feature. Well, our first question is, how do I know whether my child needs a 504 plan or an IEP? How do I decide?
With that, you'll want to look at how is your child functioning in the school? How is it affecting them academically? So you'll want to go in and see those things. If your child is not passing his classes, and it's not because he's just not doing the work, but it's because, you know, they're in the hospital this many days, they're homesick this many days, and it's affecting it, then you will definitely want you do a 504 if it's because it's of the medical needs, and then you could, after the 504, determine. If you know right away, there's sometimes you're going to know, okay, my child's in 5th grade and they can't read. Then you're going to want to have those assessments done for that IEP, because you want them to get the accommodations, the modifications, and the help they need in order to be successful.
And I would just build a little bit on that, is as you look at, especially academically, if they're struggling, and it's not because they've missed gaps of school, because that would be a disqualifier, but it's because they've gone to school every day. They're going to school most every day, and they're continuing to struggle because of those major life function issues, then they more than likely qualify to have an IEP. And that's the difference between the two. It was easy for us. Our son was good academically, but needed to have accommodations put in place to help. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done well academically. If your child's struggling with reading, the basic reading, writing, those kinds of things, you really should be looking at, is there a disability from the PI that's creating this issue?
And one thing, if you do decide like they need an IEP, you need to provide that to the school in writing.
From your doctor.
You want an assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you do that, right now, especially with everything going on, schools are gonna try to dissuade you from doing it, because they are trying to just stay above water with all the changes and trying to make sure everything is able to be done remotely.
Thank you. Our next question is, does COVID change the laws as far as accommodations on 504 plans and IEPs?
They may change how they look, but it doesn't change the law. So your accommodations may be different, because in a live school, I mean, some of the things we did, our son had a hot pass. If you have to use the bathroom, you have to use the bathroom. He doesn't need to wait 50 minutes for a passing period. But when it comes to those basic academic things, your child's sick, they can't, your school district wants them to have their camera on. Well, he doesn't feel good. He's in his pajamas today, he's attending, or they're sick and they can't attend a meeting. There are accommodations that have to be made, even digitally, in a distance learning world, that still apply. If they're sick or can't attend a meeting and they can't turn that assignment in at that time, they get those accommodations of days to make stuff up. So this being a circumstance has not changed what the requirements are for the school district and the school to accommodate your child's education.
And even with the bathroom one, that at school you would be leaving the thing, you want to make sure those teachers still know that they may have to get up and leave that screen, and don't dock them for it. Don't, call them out on it, because they really have that. So you just, they still need to adhere to all those.
Next question. Our PI student, elementary, is being offered either an online or a face-to-face option, and we need to choose that in advance of the entire school year. He struggles with online learning and needs the socialization of face-to-face. If we are offered online but choose face-to-face, can we ask for accommodations and modifications under his Section 504 plan to make it safer for him in a face-to-face setting? And I'm going to add on to that there are many questions here about that. What can we add on during this period of time, because our child might be home or might be at school?
Yeah, absolutely. You can add on if that's what the need is now. Even if you go in and they say, oh, well, we haven't used social distancing and all that anyways, still get it in there, because eventually kids are all going back to school. You don't want them to take things out like that just because all the other kids are doing it right now, because this is temporary. This is not permanent. So you really want to be able to say, hey, my kid's still going to need this. If you choose going back, just be aware that if they're offering that at any point in time, any case comes out, your child schools will close back down. And so one day they find a case, that school closes, even without, in our district, even without having students there and only some of the essential staff that have been in. We've had 2 schools that have had it closed down for a period of time for them to go back in and do cleaning, and that's without kids. You're not going to have that same socialization. A lot of places, there's no recess. There is no lunch period. You eat at your desk away from them. So they're not going to get that socialization there. Just a heads up, some people are thinking that may be okay, but for now it's not. But if you have any concerns and you go, okay, this is not working for my child, definitely talk to your school.
I would also be aware of what my school's safety protocols are.
Yeah.
Every school has to have a plan for ingress and egress, how they enter schools, how they leave schools. Temperature checks being taken, what kind of PPE is being used or required of your teachers, what access do they have to hand washing, what's your district's mask requirements. There are all of these things that come into play when you're thinking about one decision or the other. For me, if I were going to make that decision, I'd want to make sure that my school had a plan, that they knew what they were doing. It's not something that's fly by night. It should be on paper. It should be written. It should be something that could be handed to you, and they would tell you all the safety procedures that they're going through, and if they should be based on the CDC guidelines. So that's the one thing if I'm making a decision, I just want to know what's my school doing and how are they going to keep my child safe.
There is a lot of discussion about masks. Masks in most places are being required, here in California especially, because we are one of the watch spots, the hot spots, LA County is. But also, if you have a younger elementary kid, just preparing them before they go in. I work with medical students when they return. We know a couple of them, they can't wear masks for medical. And as a result, we as staff will be required to wear N95 masks in addition to the face shield, in addition to the footies, like you're going into surgery, and the outfit. So just so that your child's prepared and they know, no, these aren't doctors that are going to give me a shot, because that's one of the big concerns coming in, is they're going to come in and we look like we're going to surgery.
Thank you. And a follow-up on that is, my child has autism and is claustrophobic. He has a hard time keeping a mask on. So how should I communicate with the school to come up with an appropriate solution during this time?
And some students aren't going to be able to, and in California, that is one of the things, is if they have sensory processing. I taught it in a class that had 15 children with autism last school year. And so I've been working with the parents. If they can do it, then we are giving them tips like, from last year, I said, okay, when we come back, I know they're going to try to push these kids to have on masks. And so it was literally, we created, for some of them, we created like systems. So at home, if they wear their mask for 5 minutes. Also, if it is a sensory issue, they have, if you've seen out there on Facebook and different things, like baseball cap, and they put buttons on the bottom of the hats, and so it doesn't attach behind their ears. But otherwise, you will need a doctor's note in most places, and just the doctor saying they can't wear a mask. And then when that happens, then in a lot of places, like here, is the teacher is then required to fully gown up and everything. And each district will have that as part of their plan as to what is it going to be. Are they going to allow them in school? Some districts may choose not to. You know, they may say, no, we need to do it remotely for your child's safety and the safety of others. So that's not something, that part we can't answer because it will be done differently, but there are some different ideas. If your child, if it's a sensory thing, even claustrophobic, you might be able to help your child. But again, the doctor's note would be the best solution in talking to the school.
Would these be reasonable accommodations on a 504 plan? A seating chart, hallway passing, cafeteria, arriving 10 minutes, 15 minutes early, departing 10, 15 minutes early at the end of the day to avoid close contact with other children?
Most, yes, would be completely okay. Seating chart, as long as we're not disclosing names, because we can't disclose FERPA. So you might be able to have a seating chart and you can see how the desks are arranged and where your child would be sitting, but you wouldn't be allowed to know who's sitting around or near them. The other thing that you would take into consideration is 15 minutes early. Probably not, because that would be something contractual that would have to be worked out with a teacher. Some teachers may volunteer, but if you're in a state where teachers unions are a thing and you have a strong teachers union, in my district, if a teacher even volunteered to do 15 minutes early, one of their peers could grieve them. So 15 minutes early, probably not going to happen, but 15 minutes early getting picked up, probably definitely something that can be done as well.
And there might be, it would be talking to your school, because some schools, they will let those students, like if it's smoky outside, we have students that go and sit in the office area. You know, they have chairs up there that they can go sit in and get there early. Or maybe that they arrive a couple minutes after the bell rings, because then there will be no one in the hall.
I was going to say, build on Valerie, if it were me and someone came to that request 15 minutes early, they could sit outside my office as an assistant principal. I wouldn't have a problem with that. But teacher-wise, probably not, but talk to your school administrators and see if there's something they can do to make that happen or to help you out with it.
And with the seating, we had one of the accommodations for Ian was that if there was a child, now with COVID, they shouldn't be allowed in school. But if there would be a child that appeared to be sick, that he could go to a different area, and we had wipes in there and everything. So they would sanitize down the area.
Thank you. Next question. We have about, just as a heads up to everybody, you have about 10 minutes left and about 10 more questions. There we go. On an IEP, if a service is removed for 1 year, but the next year I would like the service added back, am I able to do this? I have received a lot of pushback, but I was originally told we could easily request the service again.
Let me add, and to clarify, because does the student no longer qualify for the service, or do they continue to qualify for the service? That's a huge difference. So if they no longer qualified, no, there's usually not a return to that service, even if there may be some struggle, because assessment says they no longer require it. But let's say, like this COVID thing, a lot of students, they went from face-to-face speech to really activities to practice speech. And he said, you know, for this year, because of the situation, we're not going to do speech service. But next year, we want it to continue as it was before. There shouldn't be any pushback whatsoever. If the student qualifies for the service, the student qualifies for the service. At any point, you can take a student, and especially in the state of California now, you can remove a student from special ed regardless. You can just sign a form that says, I would like my student removed. And the parent can sign it and say, I want my child removed from service. But later down the road, if they say, hey, this isn't working, the student continues to qualify. The minute the parent decides we want to redo this service, we want to have it continue to be implemented, it goes right back to the way it was in the last IEP. There's a term you can use, it's called stay put. So anything that happens reverts to the last IEP that was written, the last one that was agreed to with all of whatever the service you want to have implemented with your child. So that's one that we use on a frequent basis if we want to, hey, it's stay put. So the service has to be provided until we have another meeting. They can't sit there and go, we're gonna hold a meeting and it's gonna be 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month, 2 months later. No.
They have to follow the timelines. And as a parent, you can always call an IEP meeting to discuss the needs and have it documented that way. Don't just do it in a regular meeting. So you call a meeting, because then they may have to reassess. You can discuss your concerns. They're down in writing, and then they have to respond to, like you were requesting, the service or testing. They have to respond. They have to adhere to those timelines.
My school district in Texas has advised me that the IEP meeting can be moved to a virtual meeting, but assessments have to be done in person. My son has PI, chronic kidney disease, and high frequency hearing loss. Please share your thoughts.
It actually is dependent on the type of assessment they're doing. If it's for an initial to put him in, they do require the face-to-face. If it is your child already has one, that is not required. They may be saying they want it, but if your child already has that service, now if you're adding services on, those might need to be done in person. In the spring, they were able to just do everything. They stopped all the initials, IEPs, but they were able to push things. Now we are back to having to follow IDA exactly.
Yeah, and if it's not an initial, there are other ways to take care of assessment without having to have a face-to-face. It's not necessary to assess a student at every 3 years. You have to have it a triennial. You have to have some form of data, but they don't have to do formal assessment every 3 years. So
only initials.
Only initials. And so if some of the testing, like Valerie said, it has to be in person, depending on what the services are. So, and some of it can be done digitally.
I'm a parent with PI. My child does not have PI. However, I am worried about COVID during the pandemic and him bringing it home and getting me sick. Does this qualify as something I can use to request accommodations for my child?
No.
No.
You can call the school. It does not qualify because the child has to have it. But if you work with the schools, most schools are actually willing to work with you. They're not going to give you the modifications, like you get to choose this. But like if you're requesting, instead of going in person, doing it, remotely or however they would have it, most schools will work with you. If it's a public school, private schools, they get to choose what they do. So some private schools will actually, probably accommodate even more so, and some may not. But definitely just have that communication with that school principal, with the counselor too. If there's a counselor on site, bring them all in. And they usually will work with you. But you don't qualify, your child would not qualify for an IEP or 504 plan based on that.
And when it comes to Valerie has PI, I do not. I am back working at a school building every day.
With no kids.
With no kids, but still enough adults that, it'd be a concern. But the thing I do the minute I walk in the door is wash my hands. It's one of those things where I'm not touching everything on the way, everything on the way in or anything like that. I also make sure that, as much as I don't like to wear the face diaper, I wear a mask all the time because it's a safety issue for my family. So those are the things, the conversations we had even before I decided to go back. And I think those are the conversations you have with your own child is, here's what's happening. Here's what needs to happen in order for, if you're going to go to school on, and have a face-to-face experience, your mask has to be worn. You have to do your hand washing regularly. You have to make sure all these things are taking place. And it just is a safety issue for when they come home.
My son has a 504 now, but I've asked for an IEP. The district does not think he needs one. However, his grades have slipped tremendously. He is a gifted student. His fatigue and hand pain slow him down. Can I force this?
You could force an assessment. I mean, that's the one thing that you can do. And it's simple. You can find these online. How do I request an IEP assessment from my school district? They already have a form letter. You can just pretty much insert the information you need for your own child. And they have 10 days to respond to that letter. Most school districts nowadays used to be able to say no, but it's very rare. For the most part, if we get a request for assessment, we're going to do the assessment. And that's what I would do. I would put a letter into my child's school going, I request an assessment on behalf of my student.
Because if things aren't going well, otherwise they need to work with you. Okay, well, if you don't think the IEP is needed, what other accommodations do we need to put in place in the 504?
Because the 504 is obviously not working if grades are starting to slip and those kinds of things.
We have a couple more minutes and looks like 10 more questions. Everybody's starting to think now of other things to ask you. But anyway, my son was pushed through pre-K and kindergarten, can't say his ABCs or count past 12. The school let his IEP lapse and took an entire year to test him in the regular skills class. I don't know what to do to make the school keep him in kindergarten and put him in the appropriate class so that he can finally start to learn.
If his IEP lapsed and it's their fault, you need to file due process. Find an educational attorney. They're all over the place nowadays because,
and a lot of them you don't pay for.
You don't. It's not on your dollar. It's usually typically on the school district's dime. Find an educational attorney. They're out there all over, especially with this COVID thing, and they'll give you the steps you need to take. But if that happened to my child, I would file a due process suit immediately because that is illegal. They let it lapse. If we let something lapse, we have a duty to get that taken care of in a timely manner as quickly as possible.
The only exception would be is if it was due to you didn't have your child available for the testing.
Yeah, but if it's our fault and it happened in my building, we would have it done in 30 days.
My son has autism. His IEP has been in place for years. In school, he has one-to-one in a self-contained classroom with intense behaviors, and he also has PI. So the immunologist says, no way, no school. They have offered many online options, which are great, but I am needing a person, to sit with him, to attend to him. I cannot physically be his one-on-one at home because I have to work from home. We live in Florida. Can I force the school to send someone to our home?
And that's no, they can't. I would suggest that you reach out to, we have what we call regional centers that are in our state, and autism is a qualifying thing. They may be able to, they wouldn't send someone to be there all day, but they could send someone in for ABA, different kinds of behavioral services. But the school district, like here, we don't, even our home hospital kids will be done remotely.
And really the situation for us, and this is, it's super simple. We don't want anyone to be harmed. If one person, staff, student, or otherwise, would happen to something tragic would happen, it would be not only devastating to our community, it'd be devastating to our school districts, but we would be held responsible for it. And so part of it's fiduciary and money, but another part of it is we don't want anyone to be harmed in any way.
And if the doctor has said no, it would be a home hospital type situation. And here in California, that's 1 hour a day. And in the current state with the pandemic, it is online.
Thank you. This is the last question. Can you have both an IEP and a 504?
No. You don't
Okay.
have,
There's no reason.
no reason. Your 504 provides accommodations that your student would need. An IEP provides accommodations your student would need. In the grand scheme of things, and I talked about this a little bit earlier before we got on, the IEP carries a whole lot more weight. At the end of the day, when last spring, we barely got our 504s done, and I'll be completely honest with you. As a school administrator, it's a back burner item sometimes. But that IEP has such strict guidelines and such strict timelines that we're going to make sure, no matter what, we'll move heaven and earth to make sure meeting times are met, because our states really have an issue with that, and there's a lot of monetary penalty that goes with it. So. But no, there's no reason to have both. If you got one, you're good. If you got the other, you're good. Just be the person that's on top of whichever one you have. You're the advocate. You make sure you hold your school district and the employees responsible for following through with those.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody for all your questions. Thank you, Chris and Valerie, for the wonderful information you have shared. Now, we do have a lot of questions that weren't answered. And if you send an email in the chat box, or send a message in the chat box with your name, and you can even repeat your question, we will work to get your question answered and follow up with you via email. Now, at this time, I would like to invite Sean McCabe for a quick word from our sponsor.
Kathy, hi, it's Dana, and I'm going to take over for Sean today because he is not here. Hi, everyone. I'm Dana Fladhammer, and I lead the IG Community Support Team here at Takeda. Let me just start by this. What a fantastic presentation, Valerie, Chris. I've known Valerie and Chris for many, many, many years. Second presentation I've attended by them, fantastic job. I learn something every time, and I used to be a teacher. IDF, just kudos again, the relevant, timely information. At my IG source, the program that we have at Takeda, the topic of conversation that is probably #1 right now is school. Do I send them back? Do I not send them back? What if I'm the one that has PI? Do I send my child back? Is that fair? I feel guilty. What about the siblings? So I love this presentation, so relevant. You may not know us here at Takeda, and you may or you may not. We've worn a couple of jerseys over the past couple of years, and we started as Baxter, became Baxalta, then Shire, and we have landed at home at Takeda in a wonderful organization that puts the people that we serve first. And so we're not here to talk about our products, but on the off chance you don't recognize that, we are the makers of both GammaGuard, CubaTrue, and HiCubia. And when we go into the breakout sessions, we don't want to talk about product. We're here really to listen. And we're here to hear how we can support you and what resources you need, and to make sure you know about the resources that we have available at no cost, regardless of the treatment that you're on. Again, Kathy, Valerie, Chris, IDF, everybody, fantastic, and thank you for having us.
Thank you, Dana. We look forward to hearing more from you and all of our sponsors during the virtual exhibit hall today. Now, some of you might know, and some of you might have even already registered, but for those of you that don't know, next week, IDF is very excited to celebrate Youth Week. This is a wonderful new program dedicated to teens and young adults with PI. During Youth Week, we will have a number of activities, including 3 special forums, including one for parents, game night, and many more fun activities. So we do hope you will join us. So now, before we head into our virtual exhibit hall, I would like to share a bit of information about what IDF has to offer. First of all, I encourage you to please connect with us online and visit our website to access many of the resources we have to offer, such as publications, online support groups, updates on upcoming events, and so much more. You can also connect with IDF on social media to keep up to date with our community. And there's so much going on that the more channels we have, the better it is to communicate with each other and stay updated. Now, finally, again, today, thank you to all of our sponsors for today's forum. We're always so excited to be able to provide the opportunity to visit with some of our sponsors so they can share our resources with us. And I would like to invite back our Executive Vice President of Programs and Services, Hector Garcia. And Hector, do you have any final words for us before we close today?
Not final, because we're going to keep on going with forums, right?
Well, of course, but just for today, final.
Yeah, I just, thank you and IDF staff, of course, and all our industry partners, as well as the famous Rileys for their presentation. I think they're going to keep coming back for more than 2 or 3 forums, based on how everything it's turning out to be for many different people. I also wanted to make sure that everybody knows that IDF is here to offer you compassion and understanding. We'll be celebrating Youth Week next week, so stay tuned. And we have an entire schedule up on our IDF events page that you can participate. And this will be, Kathy, is this the 3rd or 4th national forum?
This is, oh my goodness, it is. It's about the 4th one. Yes, nationwide. We're on it.
So all our forums will be nationwide. So you'll have plenty of opportunities to participate. And thank you for taking the time on a Saturday morning for some, a Saturday afternoon for others. And we will, continue to do everything we can to keep you informed, bring you the latest. And IDF, it's here for you always, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Like Kathy said, ask IDF, or you can contact any of us. And thanks everybody. And I always say thanks to John Boyle, who's not here, but through his leadership, we've been able to do all these new things to keep everybody involved and to try to provide you with the information that you need in order not to feel alone. You are not alone. We're all in this together. And I guess all I need to say is, stay safe, take care of each other and yourself, and stay tuned for more forums to come. I think we got probably 30 more coming or something like that, Kathy, right? So anyway, thank you, everybody. And have a wonderful, wonderful Saturday, a great Sunday, and even better next week. Stay safe. Bye.